Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the 9th episode of the Stars, Stripes, and Sanathanis podcast, run by second-generation Hindu-American teens. It's for teens, by teens. My name is Samyuktha, and you may remember me as the co-host of our last episode regarding Kashmiri Hindu culture. I live in California and am a high school senior.
And my name is Sowmya Mambakam, and this is my second time as a co-host on this podcast after the last one on dharmic feminism. I go to the same school as Samyukta. I'm also a high school senior, and I'm really happy to be here.
So welcome back, Sowmya, and this is the return of the West Coast crew. Before we start, we would like to thank all of our new listeners and subscribers. After the last episode, we received incredible support. Over 400 views and 120 subscribers just on YouTube. Thank you all so much for listening.
So, without further ado, let's get started on today's episode about international Hinduism.
So, when most people think of Hinduism, the only thing that comes to mind is India and how it celebrates festivals. And as Hindu Americans, we kind of want to move away from that mindset. So obviously, India is incredibly vital to how Hinduism is today. It's the birthplace of Hinduism after all. But we wanted to emphasize today about the other ways Hinduism is celebrated in places across the world. So our first country we're going to talk about is
Bali. So Bali is part of the country of Indonesia, actually. But although there are many Hindus spread across Indonesia, the majority of them are concentrated in Bali, which, if I remember correctly, is about 83% Hindu. So it's an interesting story how Balinese Hinduism, as it is today, came about. So in Indonesia, when after their independence and they were trying to recognize their nationally recognized religions, so they came up with a set of 5 principles called the Panchasila principles, or in Sanskrit, you can see the word pancha also shows up there. So in order to fit Balinese Hinduism to these standards, one of which involved having one god and only one god, the Balinese had to work with a lot of Indian Hindus as well to come up with a way to fit Hinduism into that requirement because, Samyu, as you know, Hinduism is not really a one god and only one god kind of religion.
Not really.
So what they did is they kind of took the idea that we have of Brahman and they made a one god representation that they said that all the other gods like Vishnu, Shiva, and Brahma are just manifestations of this one god. So that way they were able to kind of fit Balinese Hinduism into these principles of Indonesia. Because what's very interesting about Hinduism in Bali is that it also has a lot of animist and Buddhist influences and syncretism there because the animists themselves were also not able to get their religion nationally recognized. So they kind of blended it along with Hinduism so they could also get recognition that way.
So what is animism, Sowmya?
So animism is generally the worship of, nature, spirits, trees, that kind of thing. It's indigenous to a lot of tribes of Bali, even a lot of tribes of India, if you look at their religious beliefs.
So, Sowmya, you've talked about a lot about the differences, monotheistic versus not so monotheistic. And what are the similarities between Indian Hinduism and Balinese Hinduism?
Well, so since they did refer to a lot of the old Sanskrit texts and beliefs of ancient Vedic Hinduism from India, they do follow the same 4 paths of devotion that we do. So, Karma Yoga, Raja Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. The majority of Balinese identify themselves with Bhakti Yoga. Oh. And similarly, they have the same 4 goals of life, Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha.
Oh, that's really interesting. Nice. So are there any other fun facts you got?
Yeah. So recently, April 14th, I think the Tamil celebrated Tamil New Year, Puttandu. And the day before that was, Yugadi and then many other India-wide lunar calendar New Year celebrations. So just like that, Bali has a New Year celebration for their calendar called the Paukon calendar. And for them, this New Year's Day is called Nyepi. But unlike in India, it's not really a widely celebrated kind of thing. It's more of a day of silence and a day of reflection and meditation for them, for their New Year. And it occurs sometime in March, usually.
That's kind of a stark opposite of how we celebrate it.
True.
It's fervor. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah. So going all the way north up to the other side of India now, Samyukta is going to be talking about another country
called Nepal. So Nepal has a majority Hindu population, and it developed in a time in which Hinduism and Buddhism were not separate, around 2000 BC, and most of the Abrahamic religions were non-existent. And one cool aspect about their culture is that they have a main goddess or grandmother that they venerate. So for us, we have like Bhishma Pitamaha. We call him like our Bhishma, the grandfather. For them, they have a devi called Ajima, which is their main goddess / grandmother. And she is considered their protector. So they have 8 Ajima temples surrounding their capital, Kathmandu. And she's supposed to be protecting their state, which is pretty beautiful.
So would you say that this worship of Ajima is similar to, just Shaktism in Hinduism?
I think so, yeah. Shaktism is the worship of a devi as the main goddess. And for them, so for most of them, I think, is Ajima is their main goddess. And one major festival, the biggest festival that they have is Dashain. And for us, we call it Dashara or, Navaratri. And for them, they call it Dashain. And it's a 15-day celebration in which the main goddess they celebrate is Durga, which represents the victory of good over evil. And, she destroys Mahishasura, right? And similar to that, she destroys all of our evils, mentally or physically. So even the Ramayana for them is told in a way in which Rama could only be victorious in battle after Durga was evoked. So there's a story that my parents told me about how Rama had to do a 1,000 lotus puja for Devi. And the last lotus was taken away. I think it was either lost or it was sneakily taken away as a test. And for the last lotus, what he did was he took out his eye and offered it because, he's known as a Rajiv Lochana. So his eyes are lotuses.
Oh boy, I haven't heard that story before.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I'm not sure if they celebrate the exact same way, but this is what I've learned.
So are there any other interesting festivals that they celebrate in Nepal?
Good question. So they have this festival called Swanti or Tihar, which is a 5-day celebration that they celebrate in early November, around the 2 to 6th, I think, this year, in which they have 5 days of celebrations. So the first day is Kwa or Crow Puja. So for us, when somebody passes away, we had to put offerings out for Crow, who's supposed to be the messenger from here to wherever they are.
The ancestors, yeah.
The ancestors, exactly. So that's the same thing for them. And the second day is they have a Kicha or a dog puja. And on the third day, they have a Lakshmi puja, which is the goddess of wealth, And the fourth day is really cool, which is the Maha or self puja. So I think in Hinduism, all of us are spiritual in ourselves. We all have Brahman or whoever inside of us. So they all, apparently family members line up and they do a self puja.
Oh,
it's really cool.
Wow.
And the last day is a Kija Puja or Bhai Tika, which I found a lot of similarities to Raksha Bandhan, where girls put like a tilakam on their brothers' foreheads and bless them for protection. And I think it's said on that day that the brothers are basically invincible and nothing can happen to them.
Wow, that's really nice.
Yeah.
I think it's very cool how you can see a lot of parallels between celebrations that we do in India and other Hindu celebrations in other countries, but people have still managed to personalize them to their own countries of origin.
Mm-hmm.
So going all the way down south, now to the other side of India, we have Sri Lanka. And just like what I was saying about what Samyukta was saying about how the Ramayana is celebrated in Nepal with Durga as a central character, I think the Ramayana itself is a very international Hindu kind of story because many countries have different parts of the Ramayana that they tend to celebrate and venerate. So similarly in Sri Lanka, if you think of the Ramayana in relation to Sri Lanka, obviously Lanka is a very important location in the Ramayana. And Ravana is from Lanka in the Ramayana. So many of the Hindus in Sri Lanka are the Tamils. And many of the Tamils are Shaivas. So what happens in Sri Lanka is that they have 5 main temples there, or kovils, the Pancha Ishvara temples. And these are Shiva temples that are meant to be built by Ravana. So if you go to a lot of them, they will have Shiva and Parvati, and then below them will be Ravana, because these temples show Shiva in his benevolent aspect towards Ravana.
Oh, that's interesting. So, question, are these built by Ravana or praying to Ravana?
They're built by Ravana and they venerate Ravana as a devotee of Shiva. So they worship him in that sense.
Oh, that's really cool how, we know that Ravana was a pretty bad guy, but it's really cool how they worship the positive aspects in which he was a really, really good Shiva Bhakta.
Yeah, so we at least honor like that aspect of devotion and bhakti. So a lot of the Hinduism in Sri Lanka is a mix between this Shaiva Siddhantam and Shaktism and animism from the Tamils who are incoming to Sri Lanka, or the native Tamils who live there, and the other indigenous Veda people and the Sinhalese Buddhists. Because what's very interesting is that the Tamils celebrate Muruga a lot. Muruga is a very important deity for many Tamil people. But even in Sri Lanka, the Sinhalese Buddhists and the indigenous Vedas worship a local version or local manifestation of Muruga known as Kataragama Devio. So this deity is pretty universal across Sri Lanka.
Wow.
So even as part of that, they have the Thaipusam celebration, which is very important for Muruga worshipping Tamils, and they celebrate Kabaddi Attam as part of that tradition also.
Oh, it's pretty awesome. Yeah, I like the Muruga worship. It's similar to a lot of Tamil cultures also, right?
Yeah, a lot of it is very similar to the Tamil Nadu Tamils celebrations as well.
Oh, interesting.
So, Samyukta, going all the way to the other side of the world now, what's next?
So we wanted to highlight a country from the Caribbean. So, Caribbean Hinduism is very, very significant, as I think it's the most significant minority in a lot of countries, right? From Trinidad and Tobago to
Suriname, Guyana.
That's true, yeah. So the country we like to highlight today is Trinidad and Tobago. So Hinduism arrived in 1845 approximately, as East Indians were brought to the islands through indentured labor servitude. And they were mostly brought from Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, so you might see a lot of North Indian culture still existing in Trinidad and Tobago. So even though they were brought as indentured servitudes, they retained a lot of their original home culture. And they celebrate a lot of festivals that we celebrate today, such as Deepavali and Pagwa. And it's one fun fact is that, Deepavali and Pagwa, or Holi, are public holidays in Trinidad and Tobago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I think in other countries as well, like Sri Lanka.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, and it's kind of cool how the citizens have shaped the country that kind of way.
So I had a question. So you know how in Sri Lanka you can kind of tell that many of the Hindus there are specifically Shaivas, so they worship Muruga. Do you see a lot of that kind of thing in the Caribbean or in Trinidad and Tobago?
So, good question. What I've seen is that most Trinidad and Tobago don't exactly identify as Shri Vaishnavas or Shaivas, although many do. They just pray to the Devis and the Devas, like Saraswati and Vishnu and everybody, and in that kind of way. So it's just very generic. Yeah. And one fun fact. So as a greeting, most of them don't say Namaste. They say Sita or Ram or Sita Ram.
That's
nice. I find really cool. Yeah. And one other cool thing is that I think a lot of Hindus were brought for rice plantations, right? So rice plantations became exceptionally important to Hindu Trinidadians. And as we do as well, rice is an essential part of puja. During our Karo puja, we make these kind of rice balls and put sesame on them. Yeah. And et cetera, et cetera. So rice plantations became an essential part in their lives.
Oh, wow. It's cool how that kind of thing that they were originally brought over for, which might have been very grueling and hard work for them and something they wouldn't have wanted to do, kind of grew to become very essential to their puja traditions. Mm-hmm. Are there any other interesting festivals or fun facts?
Oh, yes. So I forgot to mention this one thing. I saw this picture of a beautiful 85-foot Hanuman statue in Trinidad. It was amazing, and it was fully bred. I think he had an om on his hand and was standing in ready position with a gada in his hand. And it kind of shows that Hinduism is implanted there. It's immovable. It's an 85-foot statue. So it's like a stronghold in Trinidad.
It's a very nice metaphor. I mean, obviously this is a podcast, so we cannot show you the image right now, but we encourage everyone to look it up. It does look very amazing and epic. Mm-hmm. So we would like to end this with a deep question for everyone. If you are outside India, as I'm sure that many of you are, in what ways have you managed to retain your Hindu identity and culture in your foreign environment? Because as you've seen, even though Hinduism started in India, it spread to many places and not always through just simple migrations. Many people were brought over as, indentured servants or laborers to other countries, yet they've still managed to uphold their religion and culture. So although your lives hopefully are nowhere near as hard as that may be, in what ways have you managed to uphold your religion and culture wherever you might be?
Yeah, great question. And it's kind of amazing how these cultures have also retained their identity after so much hardship. And it reminds me of, the Irish people or African, when they were brought over as indentured servitudes, they retained their African folk music and that kind of stuff in America.
Yeah.
So I think that's it for our podcast, right? Thank you all for listening. And
Yes.
one reminder, we have HSC is organizing a Hindu Phobia conference on April 23rd. It's for everybody, but it's mostly inviting New York and New Jersey Hindus. And all the information is on HSC's Instagram, Facebook, and website.
Yes, please definitely go check this out. One of the most important things we can do as a united Hindu community is try and define what we actually face as a community. And this conference will go a very long way towards helping in that. So everyone, please go check it out and sign up. Thank you.
Yep, that's it. So thank you all for listening. Make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, all the shenanigans.
Catch us on Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Spotify.
Exactly, yeah. And yeah, my name is Samyukta.
I'm Sowmya.
And this is the West Coast Crew signing off for today.